Chapter 1. Blood flooded my throat. Hot, metallic, thick. They were my own guards. Without warning, the third silver-tipped arrow tore through my shoulder. I hit the mud hard. The impact stole my breath. A low, wet growl ripped from my chest. I was the Alpha King of the Shadow Crest Dominion. Yet here I was, dying like a stray dog in the dirt. Who exactly signed my death warrant? I had to live to find out. From there, I dragged my massive white paws through the freezing rain. Every heartbeat pushed the silver poison deeper into my veins, which meant my time was running out. My vision blurred into jagged shapes. I needed to shift into a man, but the silver burned like liquid fire. It locked me inside this heavy wolf body. I could not speak. I could not fight. I remembered my father's dying words perfectly. He told me the crown was a heavy cage. He warned me that the people closest to you always hold the sharpest knives. He was absolutely right, because my own uncle had likely paid for these arrows in my back. The mud pulled at my thick fur. The cold chewed at my aching bones. The betrayal gnawed at my dark soul. Still, I pushed my massive body forward. Rain slashed my golden eyes. The dense forest smelled like wet pine and fresh copper. My own blood painted the dead leaves. I forced one paw in front of the other, because dying in this nameless forest was simply not an option for a king. Eventually, the thick trees broke. A warm yellow light cut through the violent storm. It was a glass building, a quiet greenhouse filled with leafy shadows. It looked like a safe place to hide. By the time I reached the smooth glass, my legs finally gave out. I collapsed against the cold window, letting the heavy darkness swallow me whole. Chapter 2. Soft, warm hands touched my torn fur. I flinched. My heavy eyes snapped open in the dim light. I was inside a wooden barn. It smelled heavily of damp earth, crushed mint, and sweet vanilla. Her. Without thinking, my lips peeled back. Snarl. I was a lethal predator. My primal instinct demanded blood to survive. I tried to snap my massive jaws at her fragile wrist. But then she hummed a soft, gentle tune. Shh. It's okay. I've got you. Her voice trembled, just a little bit. Why was she touching a bleeding monster? She was a weak Omega. I could smell her low rank from across the room. She should be running away in pure terror. Instead, she knelt right in the wet dirt beside me. In that moment, the heavy tension broke. A strange, soothing magic in her voice physically forced my wolf to yield. My massive head dropped back down to the dry hay. I had spent my whole life surrounded by sneaky assassins. In my dark castle, a gentle touch meant a hidden blade. A quiet whisper meant a deadly conspiracy. But her touch? It felt like warm sunshine after a long decade of freezing winter. This will hurt, she whispered softly. Without another word, she gripped the silver arrow buried in my shoulder. She yanked hard. Roar! Agony exploded in my deep chest. Black dots swarmed my blurry vision. Blood poured onto the floor. Despite that, I didn't bite her. I couldn't do it, because she was risking everything to save my worthless life. She cleaned my deep wounds. She wiped my wet blood. She stitched my torn flesh. Her small hands moved with so much care. I watched her big, gentle eyes focus on my chest. She was beautiful. Eventually, she placed a warm blanket over my shivering back. She stood up and wiped her bloody hands on her apron. You're safe now, Ghost, she murmured softly. She walked out and locked the heavy wooden barn door behind her, which meant I was trapped inside, but I was finally safe from the storm. Chapter 3. Come morning, bright sunlight stabbed through the wooden planks. I groaned loudly. Every single muscle screamed in pain. I needed to stand up. I needed to shift back into a strong man and reclaim my stolen throne. With a single glance around the empty barn, I gathered all my remaining strength. I pushed the ancient magic through my thick blood. Shift, cough, hack. I violently spat black blood onto the yellow hay. The painful silver poison was still trapped deep inside my veins. which meant I was completely stuck. The great King Darius, reduced to a helpless, mute pet. It was totally humiliating. I wanted to smash my head against the wall. At the same time, the heavy barn door creaked open. The sweet vanilla scent hit my nose first. She walked in carrying a tin bowl of fresh water and a large chunk of raw meat. "Good morning, Ghost. You made it through the long night," she said with a bright, sunny smile. She wore a faded green dress today. Dark dirt smudged her soft cheek. Truth be told, I wanted to growl at her right then. I was a proud alpha. No one spoke to me like a stray dog. On the other hand, my stomach violently rumbled for food. I carefully ate the raw meat right from her small hand, because my stupid pride couldn't feed my starving body. What followed was pure, confusing torture. She sat on a small wooden stool and chattered endlessly about her little flowers. She talked about rare moon lilies and damp soil as if I understood every single word. I watched her pink lips move. I felt my chest tighten with a strange feeling. How could a simple Omega hold this much power over my mood? What would my ruthless enemies do if they found her hiding me here? Before she could move away, she leaned in very close to check my white bandages. As the wind shifted through the open door, I took a very deep breath. Her unique scent crashed directly into my brain. It wasn't just sweet vanilla and fresh mint anymore. It smelled exactly like mine. The ancient magic inside me recognized her pure soul instantly. Mate. My heart completely stopped. My blood rushed wildly. My entire world tilted sideways. Because of that sudden scent, a terrifying ancient instinct jolted through my spine. She was my fated mate. And just like that, everything changed forever. Chapter 4. The word mate exploded inside my skull like a deadly silver bomb. My lungs completely stopped working. Her sweet vanilla scent wrapped tightly around my fuzzy brain like a thick rope. And just like that, everything changed. As the bond pulsed, raw panic clawed deeply at my dry throat. She was mine. But I was a highly hunted target. Who exactly was funding the shadowy assassins hunting me down? I still didn't know the ugly answer, which meant she was in terrible, immediate danger. I needed to run far away into the dark, freezing woods. I had to leave because my broken, bloody world would definitely crush her soft, gentle heart. I clearly remembered how my brutal father claimed his gorgeous Luna. He brought her heavy golden crowns. He crushed his worst enemies right at her pretty feet. He painted their massive stone castle with absolute power. Yet, here I was. I brought my beautiful mate nothing but a bloody trail of dangerous killers. I could not speak to her. I could not hold her. I could not protect her as a strong man. Could I really walk away from the other half of my torn soul? To make things worse, my thick blood burned like hot fire. Still, I forced myself to stand up. My weak legs shook violently against the hard dirt. Even so, I dragged my heavy white paws toward the open barn door. I needed to protect her by leaving. But then, she softly hummed that sweet song again. With every heartbeat, my ancient wolf fought hard against my logical mind. Her gentle voice trembled as she washed my empty water bowl. As if pulled by a string, my large head turned back to look at her. She looked so tiny. She looked so lonely. What followed was a brutal war inside my own chest. As the wind shifted, the freezing rain poured harder outside. My wild survival instincts screamed at me to vanish into the dark storm. On the other hand, my wild soul begged me to lie down at her small feet. Truth be told, I was totally terrified. I was the feared Alpha King. I commanded huge, violent armies. But this quiet Omega held my beating heart firmly in her small hands. Eventually, I took one painful step over the wooden threshold. The cold rain hit my wet nose. I was ready to leave forever. But before I could move any further, she whispered my fake name. "Please stay, Ghost." In that moment, the heavy tension broke. Her sweet voice sounded so incredibly sad. A beat later, I realized something very important. She was completely alone in this cruel, awful pack. As the silence stretched, I saw a deep sadness hiding inside her bright eyes. Because of that, my protective instincts roared to massive life. I could not abandon her to these awful people. I simply couldn't do it. Instead, I slowly turned my heavy body around. My bones remembered him, the brutal king I used to be, but my soul answered only to her. With every step he took, my wild wolf fully surrendered to the mate bond. I walked right back to the warm, crackling fire, which meant my deadly secrets would stay perfectly hidden in the deep shadows just a little bit longer. Chapter 5. A loud, angry banging suddenly shattered the quiet afternoon. The wooden barn walls actually shook from the violent force. Next, a huge man kicked the door open. He was a nasty enforcer from the Silver Hollow Pack. He smelled like cheap beer and dirty sweat. What dark, evil secrets was this miserable pack hiding from the rest of the kingdom? I didn't know yet, but I already hated them. As if summoned, my sharp ears pinned flat against my head. The fat enforcer marched right up to my beautiful mate. He demanded her weekly tax money with a cruel, mocking laugh. Because of that, Lyra's sweet scent quickly turned sour with pure fear. She bravely tried to hand him a small bag of silver coins. But then, he roughly shoved her hard. Without warning, Lyra fell backward into the wet mud. She cried out in sudden pain. In the span of a breath, blinding rage completely consumed me. I wanted to rip his fat throat out. I wanted to snap his ugly bones. I wanted to paint the dirt with his nasty blood. I lunged, a blur of white fur and wild fury. But before I could attack, my sharp mind caught up with my wild instincts. If I killed this man as a rogue wolf, the pack would definitely execute Lyra for hiding me. If I shifted back into a powerful human king, my shadow assassins would easily find us and kill her in the crossfire. So, I was totally trapped. Rather, I slammed my huge body into the wooden wall. I paced the small barn furiously. My sharp claws dug deep into my own paws until I actually bled. I had to choose restraint for the very first time in my violent life. I closely watched through a tiny crack in the rough wood. I remembered my royal, bloody dungeon back home. In my mighty castle, I locked away anyone who dared to raise their voice at me. I happily threw bad men into deep, dark holes and let them rot forever. But here, I was just a helpless dog watching a bad man threaten my fated mate. Could anything feel worse than this complete helplessness? Meanwhile, the fat enforcer laughed coldly at Lyra. He snatched her precious coin bag and finally walked away into the dark forest. While her pulse raced, Lyra stayed on the muddy ground. She was shaking terribly. I let out a low, rumbling growl. I hated seeing her so scared. I hated this weak disguise. I hated feeling so totally useless. As the sky darkened, I made a very dangerous vow. I would rip that man to pieces one day. No matter how hard she tried to hide her tears, I saw her deep pain. I saw her hidden bruises. I saw her brave, unbroken spirit. Eventually, she slowly stood up and wiped the thick mud off her faded dress. The awful danger was gone for now, but the heavy threat still lingered heavily in the cold air. That night, the lonely forest felt much more dangerous than ever before, which meant my protective job as her secret shadow was officially starting right now. I stared at the dark trees with glowing golden eyes. The deadly hunt was finally on. Chapter 6. The heavy barn door slowly creaked open again. The cold night air blew inside, chilling my thick white fur. Between one breath and the next, Lyra slowly walked back into the barn. She was crying softly. Her pretty face was covered in dark purple bruises. The strong smell of her salty tears instantly broke my heavy, dark heart. She didn't know what scared her more, the cruel enforcer or the deep loneliness. Without thinking, she dropped to her knees right in front of me. She buried her wet face deep into my thick neck fur. "I am so tired, Ghost," she whispered sadly. "I am just so incredibly tired." As her wolf stirred, my own wild instincts surged forward to meet her. I didn't care about my royal crown anymore. I didn't care about my huge kingdom. I didn't care about my fancy titles. I only cared about this broken, beautiful woman holding on to me for dear life. Before either could speak, I gently nudged her chin with my wet nose. I licked the dirty mud straight off her soft cheek. I did it because she desperately needed comfort. I did it because she deserved true kindness. I did it because I was completely, hopelessly falling in love with her. She smelled exactly like sweet vanilla. She felt exactly like warm sunshine. She sounded exactly like pure, sweet heaven. How long could I possibly hide my true self from her? Would she totally hate the violent monster hiding beneath this fluffy white fur? As the mark tingled deep inside my chest, I finally accepted my new reality. The proud king of Shadow Crest was totally dead. I gladly embraced my total submission to this sweet Omega, because hiding in the dark shadows was the only way to keep her breathing. Deep down, she knew the truth about this cruel world. It only punished the weak and rewarded the nasty bullies. But I was going to change all of that for her. I was going to be her giant invisible shield. I was going to be her sharp hidden sword. As if summoned, she let out a long, shaky sigh. She wrapped her small arms tighter around my massive neck. I laid my large head gently on her lap. Her soft fingers slowly stroked my floppy ears. Her gentle touch chased away all my dark, awful nightmares. More importantly, I realized that true power wasn't just about winning bloody wars. Sometimes true power was just staying perfectly quiet. Sometimes true power was simply being a loyal friend in the dark. Come morning, things would definitely get harder. But for tonight, we were safe together. The glowing fire slowly died down to bright orange embers. Her gentle breathing finally leveled out into a deep sleep. With his scent in the air, meaning my own wild scent wrapping around her, she finally relaxed. I stayed perfectly awake, my golden eyes locked onto the dark forest tree line. I listened carefully for any snapping twigs or hidden assassins. I was her secret, magical protector now, and she let it happen, completely unaware that a deadly king slept right by her fragile side. Tomorrow I would bring her beautiful gifts from the deep woods. Chapter 7. Come morning, the damp scent of wet soil filled the bright greenhouse. Lyra stepped outside with a small wicker basket in her hand. She needed to harvest fresh herbs before the heavy rain returned. Because my heavy wolf body still carried the lingering silver poison, I could not shift into a man yet, which meant I had to walk silently at her side as her protector. Soon after, we crossed the muddy stream and entered the deep moonroot forest. The towering trees blocked out most of the morning sun. Everything smelled like green moss, damp leaves, and cool water. Did you know that forests have their own secret language? Every snapping twig and rustling leaf told a dangerous story. My sharp ears suddenly twitched. A low, rumbling growl vibrated deep inside my chest. To her left, a massive grizzly bear was waking up from its long winter nap. Lyra walked blindly toward the hidden cave because she was completely focused on finding silver leaf plants. Without warning, I lunged forward. I slammed my heavy white body directly against her path. "Whoa, Ghost, what are you doing?" Lyra gasped in sudden shock. I didn't move an inch. I pressed my wet nose hard against her hip, steering her away from the hidden monster. I gently pushed her back toward the safe path. She gathered the rare herbs. She breathed the clean air. She smiled a rare, bright smile. As the wind shifted, the bear's foul scent drifted over us. Lyra finally smelled the huge predator. Her face turned pale as white snow. "Oh, thank you, sweet boy," she whispered, burying her hands in my thick white fur. In the stillness that followed, my royal heart skipped a beat. I wasn't just a beast anymore. I was her shield. What dark secrets were actually buried deep inside these ancient caves? That was a mystery I still needed to solve. Eventually, we walked back to the safety of the sunny greenhouse. She placed her basket on the wooden table, which meant our first morning expedition was a complete success. Chapter 8. That night, the forest turned into a sea of dangerous shadows. I watched Lyra fall asleep by the warm fireplace inside her small cabin. But I couldn't rest. My proud alpha soul demanded I give her something more than just survival. Instead of staying still, I slipped out into the freezing night air. My paws hit the cold mud with absolute silence. I climbed the cold rocks. I dodged the sharp thorns. I braved the freezing winds. Who else was tracking the lone white wolf through the dark canopy? I could feel invisible eyes watching my every move. Higher and higher I climbed up the jagged cliffside. The sharp stones cut into my pads, but I didn't care about the pain. I climbed because my mate deserved the rarest treasures on earth. Moments later, I reached the highest peak of the mountain. There it grew, a glowing moon lily. Its petals shone with a soft, magical blue light. It only bloomed under a clear, starry sky. I carefully snapped the stem with my teeth. I carried it all the way back down the treacherous mountain without bruising a single petal. When I reached her cabin window, I gently dropped the glowing flower right on her wooden pillow. Come morning, sunlight flooded the small bedroom. Lyra woke up and gasped loudly. She picked up the glowing flower with trembling hands. Did you bring this for me, Ghost? She asked softly, her big eyes wide with wonder. I sat by her door and wagged my tail just a tiny bit. I did it because her bright smile was worth every sharp thorn on that mountain. Truth be told, I felt like a foolish pup trying to impress a queen. Yet her soft laughter chased away all my lingering royal stress. As the silence stretched, she tucked the glowing flower behind her ear, which meant my strange courtship was working better than I ever planned. Chapter 9. While the forest held its breath, a foul stench cut through the clean night air. It smelled like cheap iron and dark magic. My royal blood ran instantly cold. One of my uncle's assassin scouts had finally found my trail. I tracked the scent. I closed the distance. I ended the threat. The rogue scout was hiding behind a thick oak tree, holding a silver-laced crossbow. He grinned a nasty, crooked grin. He thought he had caught an easy prey. He had no idea he was looking right at the Alpha King. Before he could pull his trigger, I leaped through the dark air. My jaws locked onto his thick arm. Crack! He screamed, but I silenced him permanently. I killed him quickly because he dared to bring his dirty war to Lyra's peaceful doorstep. Searching his dead body, I found a leather pouch filled with unrefined gemstones. They glittered brightly in the moonlight. I picked up the heavy pouch in my teeth. I carried it straight back to the greenhouse. I dropped the bloody bag of jewels right at Lyra's feet. She stared at the glittering stones in utter disbelief. Ghost, where on earth did you find these? I simply sat down and licked my paw, playing dumb. I couldn't tell her that I just murdered a man to protect her. Eventually, she picked up a shiny ruby and shook her head with a warm smile. You are the most ridiculous wolf in the whole world, she whispered. In that moment, everything felt entirely right. My kingdom could burn to ash for all I cared. I had my mate, my greenhouse, and my quiet life. Yet, the dark world outside was still spinning, which meant our peaceful days were numbered. The storm was coming for us both. Chapter 10. Meanwhile, the sound of a sleek carriage rattling down the dirt road broke our quiet morning. A rich, heavy scent of expensive cologne and artificial pine drifted into the greenhouse. Prince Lucian Ravenshade had arrived. Why did he always show up whenever I managed to share a peaceful moment with my mate? Lucien stepped out of his carriage, looking like a walking gemstone. He wore a crisp velvet jacket and flashed a blinding, teeth-whitened smile. Did you know that dangerous men always hide behind pretty faces and sweet words? Lucian walked straight up to Lyra, his eyes glowing with predatory interest. Good morning, beautiful. Lucian purred smoothly, leaning far too close to her personal space. I brought you another order of flowers I don't actually need. Lyra blushed a soft shade of pink, offering him a polite, shy smile. Right away, my hackles rose up like sharp needles. A dark, ugly wave of blind jealousy flooded my chest. I bolted out from the shadow of the greenhouse table, planting my massive white body squarely between them. My lips pulled back. A low, vibrating growl ripped straight from my throat. Well, hello there, beast, Lucian chuckled, stepping back with a careless shrug. Your fierce little dog is awfully protective today, isn't he, Lyra? Lyra patted my head gently, completely unaware of the raging war inside my mind. He's just cautious around strangers, Your Highness. Ghost is a good boy. Truth be told, I wanted to lunge at Lucian's arrogant throat and tear his fancy velvet jacket into bloody shreds, because he was looking at my mate with hungry, calculating eyes. What's worse, I realized a terrifying, bitter truth in that exact second. As a mere wolf, I had zero social standing. I had zero pack authority. I couldn't bare my teeth as an alpha king, because doing so would blow my cover and sign our death warrants. I was forced to sit quietly in the dirt while another man courted my queen. Lucian reached out and brushed a stray lock of hair away from her face. My claws dug deeply into the soil. My blood boiled with white-hot fury. Eventually, Lucienne handed her a heavy leather coin purse and whispered a slick compliment before finally turning back toward his carriage. I let out a long, heavy sigh of pure frustration as his carriage rolled away down the dusty road, which meant the real danger wasn't just the assassins in the woods anymore. It was the charming prince stepping right through our front door. Chapter 11. To make things worse, the absolute worst-case scenario happened later that very afternoon. Lucian returned for a second visit, but this time, he brought a formal, sealed invitation in his manicured hand. What followed was a conversation that completely shattered my fragile, hidden world. Lucian smiled warmly down at Lyra, his eyes practically begging her to say yes. "The annual Harvest Moon Gathering is only 3 days away, Lyra," Lucian said smoothly, his voice dripping with false concern. "You spend all your days hiding in this dusty greenhouse. You deserve to see the world. Come as my personal honored guest. Let me show you what true luxury feels like." Lyra's breath hitched in her throat. She stared at the golden invitation like it was a magical key to freedom. Because she had spent her entire life feeling invisible and unwanted, a prestigious invitation from a royal prince felt like a miracle. I don't know, Your Highness," Lyra stammered softly, looking down at her patched apron. "My pack leaders never let Omegas attend royal gatherings." "I am the Crown Prince of Crimson Vale," Lucian insisted gently, taking her small hand in his. "No one in Silver Hollow will dare touch you if you are standing right by my side." Watching them touch broke something vital inside my chest. My wolf let out a miserable, broken whine. Lyra looked up, her bright eyes shining with a rare spark of hope. "Yes," she whispered softly. "I will go with you." In that moment, the entire game changed forever. The midpoint shift hit me like a physical blow. I realized a horrific, undeniable reality. By hiding my true identity to protect her from my assassins, I was actively pushing her straight into the arms of another man. My disguise had officially become a dark, suffocating cage. If she went to that massive gathering with Lucienne as her protector, she would see a world I could never let her experience as a mute wolf. I was losing her, and I had no one to blame but myself. Could I really let her walk into a den of political wolves while I stayed behind as a useless pet? The answer burned my soul. I had to become a man again, no matter the deadly cost. Chapter 12. That night, the heavy darkness of the barn felt suffocating and cold. Lyra was fast asleep inside her small cabin, leaving me alone with my desperate mission. Instead of resting, I stood up on my shaky, trembling paws. I closed my golden eyes and forced every ounce of my ancient royal magic to surge through my veins. Shift. Gasp. A violent, blinding wave of agony exploded across my entire body. My bones cracked and ground together, screaming in violent protest. I collapsed hard into the dry hay, coughing up thick black sludge. The silver poison laced with dark magic was still poisoning my blood. The magic rejected my command. The shift failed entirely. Blood pooled around my snout. My vision spun wildly out of control. I was completely trapped inside this furry prison, utterly powerless to stop time. The heavy barn door creaked open. Footsteps rushed across the floor. "Ghost? Oh, sweet heavens, what's wrong?" Lyra cried out, dropping to her knees beside my convulsing body. She wrapped her warm arms around my shivering shoulders. She didn't know I was an almighty king. She didn't know I was choking on royal blood and dark magic. She just thought her favorite animal was sick and dying. "Don't worry, Ghost," she whispered fiercely, tears dripping down onto my white fur. I'll protect you. I won't let anything bad happen to you." Her words cut through my chest like a razor-sharp knife. Because of that sweet, heartbreaking promise, a bitter laugh bubbled up inside my bleeding throat. The feared Alpha King of Shadow Crest needed an overworked, abused Omega to protect him. As the sky darkened outside, I rested my heavy head against her chest, letting her steady heartbeat anchor my shattering soul, which meant I had no choice left. I would have to travel to the dangerous Harvest Moon gathering as a mute animal, completely stripped of my royal crown. The trap was fully set and the wolves were finally closing in for the ultimate kill. Chapter 13. Moments later, the grand gates of the Harvest Moon gathering rose before us like a jagged iron jaw. Hundreds of powerful packs crowded the massive campgrounds. Alphas growled at each other, flexing their dominant auras. Omegas scurried around like frightened mice carrying heavy trays of roasted meat. With every heartbeat, my chest tightened with a suffocating weight. I walked right at Lyra's left heel, acting like a common, brainless pet. Because I couldn't shift into my true form, I had to swallow every single ounce of my royal pride. Did you know that humiliation tastes just like copper and ash? Soon after Prince Lucien's elegant carriage rolled to a complete stop, a dozen elite guards rushed forward to open the door. Lucien stepped out smoothly, offering his hand to Lyra with a theatrical flourish. She took it, looking like a lost princess in her simple patched dress. As the wind shifted, hostile growls rippled through the surrounding crowd. Lesser wolves bared their sharp teeth at us because an Omega had no business walking among elite royals. They thought she was weak. They thought she was easy prey. A growl rose in my throat to warn a sneering beta who stepped too close to Lyra. Lucien shot me a sharp, warning look. "Heel, beast," the prince muttered under his breath, stepping closer to shield Lyra. Truth be told, I wanted to snap Lucien's manicured fingers right off his hand. Yet, I forced my white tail down. I forced my massive ears flat. Because my only job right now was keeping my mate alive in this den of vipers. Eventually, we were led past the noisy outer rings into the inner circle of high-ranking tents. The air here smelled overwhelmingly of expensive perfumes, roasted game, and raw political ambition. In that moment, I caught a faint, sickening odor drifting from the royal pavilion. It smelled like old iron, dark magic, and silver-laced steel. It was the exact same scent of the assassins who ambushed me in the forest, which meant my traitorous uncle was already here, waiting to finish what he started. Her breath caught as Lucien guided her toward the massive central feast table, and just like that, we walked right into the lion's den. Chapter 14. That night, the great bonfire roared to life, casting long, bloody shadows across the royal campground. Hundreds of wolves gathered around the massive dance floor, howling at the rising moon. While her pulse raced, Lyra sat nervously at the high table beside Prince Lucien. She looked entirely out of place among the glittering jewels and silk gowns. Before the words left her lips, Lucien stood up and offered his hand for the traditional opening dance. Lyra hesitated, looking down at me where I lay quietly beneath her wooden chair. "Go on, my lady," Lucien coaxed smoothly, his voice dripping with honey. "Let them see how a true queen shines." As if pulled by a string, Lyra finally nodded and placed her small hand in his. They stepped onto the packed dirt floor as the drums began to beat a heavy, tribal rhythm. Under the weight of his stare, I watched every single movement they made. Lucien pulled her far too close, his fingers resting low on her waist. Lyra offered a polite, nervous smile, but her eyes kept darting back to me. What's worse, a circle of arrogant pack leaders began mocking her behind her back, laughing at her simple clothes and low Omega rank. My alpha blood boiled inside my veins because I wanted to rip their mocking tongues right out of their mouths. Instead, I forced myself to stay completely still beneath the table. I made the most painful choice of my entire life. I let another man hold my mate. I let her dance under the moonlight with a rival prince. Why did I do it? Because forcing her to stay hidden with a broken, powerless wolf would destroy her happiness forever. In the stillness that followed the first heavy song, the crowd erupted into loud, drunken cheers. Lucien whispered something sweet into her ear, making her blush softly. Her chest ached as she looked over at me with sad, apologetic eyes. She thought I was just a dumb animal. She didn't know I was bleeding inside for her. By the time the dance ended, I knew I couldn't stay here hiding in the dirt any longer. Something inside her shifted as Lucian tried to kiss the back of her hand, and she gently pulled away. She missed her quiet greenhouse. She missed her peace. Moments later, I slipped quietly away from the table into the dark, whispering trees. The real war was about to begin. Chapter 15. Deep down, she knew the truth about the danger lurking outside, even as I crept deeper into the black forest alone. My sharp wolf nose caught that foul, metallic scent again, silver and old blood. As the silence stretched, I stalked silently through the prickly brush toward the edge of the royal camp. The sounds of the festive music faded into a low, muffled hum. Between one breath and the next, I froze behind a thick cluster of pine trees. There, standing near a dark ravine, was a figure draped in heavy royal velvet. As the truth unraveled, the cloaked man turned around, revealing his vicious, sneering face in the pale moonlight. It was my uncle, Lord Malachor. More importantly, a massive rogue army leader was handing my uncle a heavy pouch of silver coins. "Is the poison working?" the rogue leader rasped in a harsh, gravelly whisper. "The king is dying slowly inside his own fur," my uncle laughed coldly, a sickening, wicked sound. "Tonight, when the moon reaches its highest peak, we slaughter every single alpha at the feast. Then, I take the crown." Because of that horrifying revelation, every hair on my body stood straight up on end. The attack wasn't planned for next week. It was happening tonight, right here, right now. Without warning, a twig snapped beneath my heavy paw. Lord Malachor whipped his head around, his dark eyes narrowing into the shadows. "Who's there?" he hissed, drawing a silver-laced sword. My breath caught in my throat. If I stayed, I would be discovered. If I ran, Lyra would die in the coming massacre. Without another word, I bolted backward into the dark woods like a streak of lightning. I had to get back to Lyra. I had to find a way to break the silver curse before the clock ran out. As the sky darkened into an inky black void, the war drums at the camp beat louder, signaling the final hour. The trap was closing, and time had officially run out. Chapter 16. Blood and fire suddenly swallowed the night sky. A deafening war horn blasted through the camp, turning the festive gathering into a nightmare of panic and death. Heavy screams echoed from every corner. Without warning, hundreds of wild, bloodthirsty rogues poured out of the dark tree line. They carried heavy iron axes and burning torches. I sprinted across the trampled grass as fast as my forepaws could carry me. My heart pounded wildly against my ribs. Where was Lyra? Smoke stung my eyes. The metallic smell of fresh blood choked the air. Alphas fought back fiercely, but the element of surprise gave the rogues a brutal advantage. Tents collapsed in roaring flames. Frightened Omegas ran in every direction, screaming for their lives. Still, I pushed forward through the chaos. I dodged a swinging sword and leaped over a burning wooden cart. Eventually, I caught her sweet vanilla scent drifting from the center of the camp. My paws slid in the mud as I rounded a burning pavilion. There she was. Lyra was trapped against a wooden post, shielding a terrified Omega child with her own small body. 3 massive rogues circled her like hungry wolves, their wicked grins flashing in the firelight. "Well, look at what we found," the lead rogue sneered, raising a heavy, silver-tipped mace. "A pretty little snack before we burn this whole place down." In that moment, cold fury paralyzed my thoughts. I let out a deafening, blood-curdling roar that rattled the surrounding trees. My massive white body launched through the smoky air like a missile. I slammed into the lead rogue, tearing his throat out before he could blink. The other 2 rogues turned in absolute shock. I didn't give them a chance to breathe. I ripped through them with savage, merciless efficiency. Yet the victory was short-lived. Out of the smoke stepped a heavily armored commander holding a glowing, net-like weapon made entirely of pure silver, which meant the trap was fully closing around us. Chapter 17. What followed was a desperate, terrifying struggle for survival. The armored commander hurled the heavy silver net directly through the air. Before I could dodge, the magical mesh trapped my white fur, burning my skin like acid. I collapsed hard onto the blood-soaked dirt, growling furiously as I tried to claw my way out. The silver poison surged back into my veins with a vengeance, freezing my muscles and suffocating my magic. "Ghost!" Lyra screamed, running over to my side despite the danger. She grabbed the edges of the burning net and tried to pull it off me with her bare hands. "Hold on! I'll get you out!" "Get away from the beast, girl!" the commander barked, marching forward with his massive sword raised high above his head. My chest ached with unbearable terror. I couldn't move. I couldn't shift. I couldn't protect her. If I stayed in this wolf form, the commander would execute us both right here in the dirt. Instead of running away, Lyra planted herself directly between the deadly sword and my trapped body. She looked up at the armored giant with shaking, tear-filled eyes, but her jaw was set with fierce determination. "If you want to kill him, you have to go through me first," she whispered, her voice surprisingly steady. My soul cracked right down the middle. Because of that brave, foolish act, a hot wave of pure, unbridled rage exploded deep inside my chest. I couldn't let her die. I refused to let her die. As the commander brought his heavy sword swinging down toward her head, my inner wolf fought back with impossible, godlike fury. The silver net began to smoke and snap beneath the sheer pressure of my awakening power. Suddenly, the ground shook violently beneath us. My bones cracked, stretched, and reshaped with sickening crunches. The beast vanished, replaced by the towering, terrifying form of the true Alpha King. Chapter 18. The transformation was absolute. I caught the falling sword with my bare, blood-stained hands and crushed the steel blade into twisted pieces. With a single backhand strike, I sent the commander flying through a wooden tent wall, ending his life instantly. The battlefield around us went dead silent. Hundreds of surviving wolves stopped fighting and stared in absolute horror. They dropped to their knees, recognizing the lethal aura of the supreme Alpha King of the Shadow Crest Dominion. I stood panting in the smoke, towering over the dirt. I slowly turned my head, my golden eyes blazing with desperate hope as I looked down at my mate. Lyra stared up at me in total, shattering disbelief. Her soft lips parted. Her small hands trembled violently as she looked from my human face down to the bloody crown etched into my armor. The gentle companion who slept beside her fireplace followed her through flower fields and brought her ridiculous forest gifts, was the most feared tyrant alive. "Darius," she whispered, her voice cracking with profound betrayal. It was you all along?" "Lyra, please," I choked out, taking a step toward her with my hands raised in surrender. She stepped backward into the shadows, her eyes wide with fear and a deep, cutting hurt. She saw the lies. She saw the blood. She saw the king she never asked for. Without another word, she turned around and ran away from me into the dark, whispering forest. The all-is-lost moment had arrived. I dropped to my knees in the ash, completely broken. My core emotional question was finally answered in the worst way possible. I revealed the monster, and I destroyed the only pure thing that ever loved me. Chapter 19. After that night, absolute silence filled the cold stone halls of my royal castle. My heavy golden crown felt like an anvil pressing down on my skull. I had swiftly executed my traitorous uncle. I had purged every corrupt guard from my court. Yet my chest remained utterly hollow. Have you ever realized that holding all the power in the world means nothing if you have no one to share it with? I sat alone on my massive throne, staring into the dark shadows. Why did she run away? Because I had lied to her from the very first day. Because I had hidden behind a layer of white fur instead of trusting her with the truth. Suddenly, my fingers brushed against something delicate inside my royal coat pocket. I pulled it out. It was a withered, dried-up moon lily, the very first gift I had ever brought her as a wolf. In that moment, a blinding wave of clarity washed over me. She hadn't fallen in love with a mythical beast or a terrifying monarch. She had fallen in love with the quiet moments, the shared warmth, and the simple kindness of a creature that protected her. More importantly, I realized that true strength didn't come from wearing armor. True strength came from complete and total vulnerability. I couldn't win her back with royal decrees or gold coins. Still, a heavy knot of fear tightened in my throat. What if she never forgave me? What if I was already too late? Eventually, I made up my mind. I ripped off my heavy royal cape, dropped my jeweled crown onto the cold stone floor, and walked away from the throne. Which meant the king was officially dead, and only a repentant man remained. Chapter 20. Eventually, I arrived back at the desolate edge of the Moonroot Forest. The once vibrant greenhouse looked like a disaster zone. Shattered glass covered the dirt. Splintered wooden beams lay scattered in the mud. The storm had left total devastation in its wake. Instead of marching up to her front door with an army, I took off my fine silk shirt. I rolled up my sleeves, baring my broad back to the pouring rain. Because actions always speak louder than empty words, I didn't say a single thing. I simply picked up a heavy wooden hammer and went to work. I hammered the broken beams back into place. I swept up the sharp shards of glass with my bare hands, ignoring the shallow cuts on my palms. I cleared away the ruined soil and planted fresh green shoots. Hour after hour, the cold rain lashed against my skin. My muscles screamed with fatigue. Yet, I didn't stop. I worked through the freezing night and into the biting morning light. Not only that, I made sure every single flower bed was restored to absolute perfection. It was my penance. It was my silent apology carved into the very earth she loved. Truth be told, my royal hands had never done manual labor a day in my life, but every drop of sweat felt like washing away the heavy sins of my crown. As the sky darkened into twilight on the third day, the cabin door slowly creaked open. My heart skipped a violent beat. I dropped my hammer, turned around, and looked right into her big, beautiful eyes. Chapter 21. By the time our eyes locked, the world completely melted away. Lyra stood on her wooden porch, clutching a warm woolen blanket tightly around her shoulders. She looked exhausted, pale, and heartbreakingly fragile. "Darius," she whispered softly, her voice trembling in the damp air. I didn't rush toward her. I didn't demand she listen to my excuses. Instead, I sank slowly down onto my knees, right in the wet mud. I opened my empty palms and placed a sharp silver dagger directly on the damp earth between us. "You have every right to hate me," I spoke, my voice thick with raw emotion. "You can pick up this blade. You can cut me away from your life forever. Or you can let me spend the rest of my days earning your trust." Lyra stared down at the silver dagger. Her chest rose and fell in shallow, rapid breaths. She took one hesitant step forward, then another, until she was standing right in front of me. As the silence stretched, she reached out. Her warm fingertips lightly brushed against the fresh cuts on my bleeding palms. "You're an absolute fool, Darius Nightbane," she choked out, a quiet tear spilling over her cheek. Before I could answer, a loud, terrifying war horn pierced the evening quiet. The hair on the back of my neck stood straight up. Out of the darkening tree line, a dozen surviving rogue soldiers broke through the brush, weapons raised high, hungry for final revenge. The final battle was finally here. Chapter 22. The lead rogue laughed a harsh, cruel laugh, raising a heavy iron axe high above his head. "Kill the king, and burn this wretched place to the ground." Without warning, the dozen surviving enemies rushed forward like a tidal wave of blood and steel. My heart pounded against my ribs. But this time, I didn't shift into a wolf to face them alone. Instead, I drew my heavy steel sword, standing side by side with my mate. "Darius, duck!" Lyra screamed fiercely. Before I could blink, she kicked open a hidden glass barrel near the greenhouse wall. A thick, blinding cloud of violet sleeping spores erupted into the damp air. 3 rogues instantly coughed, dropped their weapons, and collapsed hard into the mud, fast asleep. "Brilliant!" I roared over the noise, slicing through the air and disarming a charging soldier with a single brutal strike. In that moment, we weren't a helpless Omega and an overprotective king. We were a true team. She used the harsh terrain, the thorny vines, and her deep knowledge of toxic plants to blind and trap our attackers. I provided the raw muscle, shielding her body with my own whenever a blade came too close. Clang! Sparks flew as my sword smashed against the final rogue commander's shield. He sneered, thrusting his dagger toward my chest. Before he could land the blow, Lyra tossed a heavy clay pot straight at his head. Crash! The man stumbled backward, dizzy and disoriented. That was all the opening I needed. With a fierce battle cry, I drove my sword straight through his armor, ending the threat once and for all. As the silence stretched across the ruined nursery, the last of the enemy cowards turned and bolted back into the dark woods. The final battle was finally over. We had won. Together. Chapter 23. Moments later, the heavy smoke cleared away into the cool night air. Inside the partially repaired greenhouse, a warm lantern flickered softly on a wooden crate. Lyra sat on a stool while I gently cleaned a shallow cut on her arm with a wet cloth. My hands trembled slightly. The memory of how close I came to losing her made my chest ache. "You didn't have to fight them with me," I murmured softly, my voice thick with lingering fear. Lyra looked up, her big eyes shining with quiet strength. She reached out and gently traced her warm fingers across my bruised jawline. "You always protected me, Darius," she whispered, a sweet smile touching her lips. "It was my turn to protect you." In the stillness that followed, all the remaining walls between our souls completely crumbled away. I leaned forward and pressed my forehead gently against hers. We didn't need any more lies. We didn't need any more disguises. "Will you come home with me?" I whispered, holding my breath. "Not as a captive, not as a pet, but as my true queen?" Lyra let out a soft, happy sigh. She wrapped her arms around my neck and pulled me close. "I am already home," she whispered against my lips. "And yes, I will come with you." And just like that, our broken pieces finally fit back together into something whole, unbreakable, and perfectly real. Chapter 24. Come morning, the grand limestone balconies of the Shadow Crest Dominion gleamed brightly beneath the rising sun. Thousands of pack members crowded the vast courtyard below, murmuring in anxious anticipation. They expected a cold, ruthless tyrant to address them today. Instead, I stepped out onto the high stone balcony, holding Lyra's warm hand tightly in mine. She wore a simple, elegant gown woven from silver thread and adorned with fresh moon lilies. Before the sea of bowing alphas and waiting pack leaders, I did something no king in our history had ever done before. I slowly sank down onto one knee right in front of Lyra. Gasps echoed through the massive crowd below. I pulled a glowing moon lily from my pocket and gently tucked it behind her soft ear, right before I placed the heavy golden crown upon her head. "I claim you not because fate demanded it," I spoke clearly, my voice ringing across the silent kingdom. "I claim you because we freely chose one another. My heart is yours, today and for all time." Lyra smiled, tears of pure joy shining in her bright eyes. She reached down, cupped my face, and kissed me deeply in front of every wolf in the realm. For the first time in my life, the heavy crown didn't feel like a cage. It felt like a gift. Because I had finally found what I always longed for. A home where I was loved. A family that would never abandon me, and a queen who saw my true soul, the end.